Hello everyone! It's a new year, which means it's time for a new round of these videos. It's time to talk about what else I saw in January. These are movies that I watched last month but didn't review. For any newcomers, hi, welcome. These videos typically feature an eclectic mix of old and new movies of all different genres. There are a few genres that come up a little more frequently though, because those are the kinds of movies that I watch with my parents. Now on with the list. The first thing we watched at the beginning of the month was Chernobyl, the HBO miniseries that everyone else in the world watched when it aired last year. I'm sure you've already heard of it, but if you haven't, it's a 5-episode drama about the explosion at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant and its aftermath. The program focuses on the massive attempt at a cover-up and the spread of misinformation by the Soviet powers that be. It's also a study of cause and effect, the chain reaction that leads to disaster. The quality is excellent, thanks in no small part to the lead actors, Jared Harris, Stellan Skarsgård, and Emily Watson. I really liked Jared Harris in The Terror. Sometimes he was the only thing I liked, so it was nice to see him in another splendid performance here, and I really enjoyed the shifting dynamic between his character and Stellan Skarsgård's character, which was a rare source of levity. It's not a fun miniseries by any stretch of the imagination, so for me, these brief moments of humor with their passive-aggressive relationship were a welcome diversion. The writing is great, with several thought-provoking lines. It's tense, I can't emphasize that enough, with memorable images of the non-graphic and the graphic variety. I did have one minor recurring difficulty, which didn't have anything to do with graphic content or all the scientific talk, which was surprisingly easy to follow, thank goodness. Multiple times a dire problem would pop up, and the solution was something terrifying and life-endangering, but they had to do what they had to do, so they'd go in, and it was really stressful sequence, and then the story moved on to the next thing, like, okay, that problem's taken care of, and I was like, wait, it is? I've also gotten the impression from the way I've heard people talk about it that there's a tendency to take what the miniseries says at face value. But just because a movie or series is well made and heavily researched doesn't mean it's without inaccuracy or conjecture or even deliberate revision. I'm not an expert on Chernobyl, so I can't say how much of what is depicted is a faithful representation of what really happened, but I know others have addressed some issues, and this is a character-driven, dramatic recreation of what the writers think may have happened. I think sometimes people overlook that. But regardless of any of that, Chernobyl was an engrossing miniseries, and I very much enjoyed watching it, even the parts that made me squeamish or anxious. I'm glad to not be out of the loop anymore on this one, and for the most part I agree with the general favorable consensus. Next up is a 1965 war film, or rather anti-war film, titled King and Country. This is sort of a courtroom drama in the trenches film, where Dirk Bogarde plays a lawyer pleading the case of a man on trial for desertion, played by Tom Courtenay. There isn't really much question of whose side you're supposed to be on in this one, especially as the film occasionally cuts to the soldier's comrades, a rowdy lot who are eager for his execution. I enjoyed the first 2/3, but didn't care as much for the final third. I can't really say why. It's a moving drama, but bleak, as most, if not all, World War I films are. It's a little more intimate, I'd say, than 1957's Paths of Glory, which deals with similar themes, but in a different, more cinematic way. The next one is 1948's He Walked by Night, which is a docudrama-style noirish film, based on a true story, they say, about the hunt for a clever thief who gets caught in the act and kills a policeman. This was a very good movie with an interesting insider look at police procedural of the time, and Dragnet fans will enjoy a good supporting role from Jack Webb, whose character I really liked. And according to the people on IMDb.com, it seems this movie at least partially inspired Dragnet. Richard Basehart stars as the ruthless thief-turned-killer. It's a very good performance, one of the best I've seen from him, I think, especially in one scene where he has to dig a bullet out of his own side. It's all up to him to convey the tension and grisliness of what's happening through a long close-up on his face. The final chase sequence is also very good, strongly reminiscent of another movie that happens to be one of my favorites, which came out the following year. Amazon Prime likes to recommend old, cheesy horror movies to us. I can't imagine why. And last month, we finally got around to watching one that my mom's been itching to see ever since Prime nudged it in our direction, 1958's The Trollenberg Terror. This movie currently has a middling 5.0 score on IMDb.com, and I'm gonna go ahead and say it's underrated. Mom and I both thought it was quite a good British B-movie about a radioactive cloud causing mysterious and gruesome deaths on a Swiss mountainside. Yes, when you finally see the Trollenberg Terror, it is laughable. The low-budget special effects are not good, but the movie was smart and kept the monster hidden until close to the end, and I applaud it for that. Otherwise, this film, which has a screenplay written by Hammer horror favorite Jimmy Sangster, has an involved story with a lot of fun twists, and there's a whole lot of weird goings-on, decapitations, sketchy lodge guests, and a mind-reading girl played by Janet Monroe receiving messages from the cloud. My mom and I got a big kick out of it, what can I say? Up next is another film that my mom and I really enjoyed, a movie that I've been wanting to see for many years, 1952's My Pal Gus. Richard Widmark plays a fast-talking, hard-working, rough-around-the-edges businessman and divorcee who has difficulty connecting with his troublesome 5-year-old son, Gus. That should pretty much explain why I wanted to see the movie. My mom, a longtime Widmark fan, had seen it years ago and talked it up a lot, and I really wanted to see Widmark not just playing against type, but acting opposite a little kid. He was good at it in Down to the Sea and Ships, and briefly in Panic in the Streets, and I wasn't disappointed with this one either. This is a very charming movie, where the chaotic family dynamic starts to change when Widmark's secretary finds a daycare that will accept Gus on the condition that his father come in for a parent participation day. And then, of course, Widmark develops feelings for the sweet-tempered, understanding teacher played by Joanne Dru. I especially enjoyed the scenes where Widmark interacted with children, which was both hilarious and endearing, with plenty of physical comedy, such a refreshing change of pace. And the little kid who plays Gus, George Winslow, was great. He's got a very direct personality and a gruff, deep voice. It took no effort to believe he was Richard Widmark's son. There's a little girl in the movie who was super cute too, and she wasn't afraid to give Widmark a little sass. I loved it. The next movie is one that was kind of an impulse rental, and I'm not sure if mine is going to be a minority opinion or not. 2019's Crawl. A girl gets trapped with her dad in a creepy crawl space surrounded by gators during a Category 5 hurricane. This had potential to be terrible, but I really enjoyed it. It's a solid premise, and they were smart and kept it short and simple. It's little more than 80 minutes long, basically just the two characters, father and daughter played by Barry Pepper and Kaya Scodelario, and no subplot except for the emotional conflict that already exists between them. Sure, the CGI is obvious at times, especially in more brightly lit scenes, and there's one groan-worthy line, but they took a scenario that's already disturbing, to me it could only be worse if it was snakes, and kept the tension at high levels throughout with a constant cycle of rising and falling action. I thought it was fine, and I give it a stamp of approval. Maybe everyone else hated it, I don't know. I liked it. The next one is a movie that I already told you I watched via Community Post, 1964's A Fistful of Dollars, also known as Per un pugno di dollari. A few years ago, I made a video in which I talked about 5 westerns that were so good they made me stop hating the genre. I have come a long way since then. I've seen a lot more westerns voluntarily and liked them. I don't turn my nose up at the genre anymore. One of those 5 westerns was The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, the last movie in Sergio Leone's so-called spaghetti western Dollars trilogy. Time out. What is the correct pronunciation of his name? Sergio Leone? Sergio Leone? Sergio Leone? I don't know. I have heard equally respected film scholars pronounce it differently, and it drives me crazy. I most often hear Sergio Leone, but that doesn't sound right. I go with it because that's what I hear most people say, but I don't know if they're saying it right. Same goes for Ennio Morricone. Ennio Morricone. I don't know. And those two names, they so often go hand in hand. I don't want to sound stupid, but I cannot find a clear answer. Everyone says something different. Okay. Let's go back. Anyway, last month I realized, as it was about to leave Prime, that it was about time for me to finally watch the first movie in the trilogy, A Fistful of Dollars. And I really liked it. Clint Eastwood's man with no name rides into a deadly Mexican village to offer his services as a gunslinger to two rival families and ends up playing them against each other. Brilliantly. Clint Eastwood is super cool, charming, and even a little good-humored. Yeah, he kills a lot of people without a thought, but there's somehow no question that he's the good guy. I kind of expected the string of despicable, ruthless personalities in a lawless, grimy West. What I didn't expect was the thrilling, adventurous tone and the surprisingly moving family narrative woven into it, and I was especially tickled by the kooky side characters. The Undertaker, who gleefully makes coffins all day and picks up bodies in the street. The guy in white who... what is his job? Bell ringer? He seems to just run around saying cryptic things. He was nuts. And of course, there's the stylistic signature of Sergio Leone. The wide shots, emphasis on negative space, lengthy build-up to a shootout. These movies rely so heavily on nonverbal communication. The eyes, the stance, the hand muscles. It's fascinating, and what would it be without the musical score? When I posted about this movie last Friday night, I mentioned that the second movie, For a Few Dollars More, was also going to be leaving Prime at the end of this month, but I wasn't sure if I was going to get a chance to watch it. Well, the very next night, both my parents said to me, "So, are we going to watch that second movie?" Because they're awesome. So here you go. Next movie is Dollars Trilogy No. 2, 1965's For a Few Dollars More, also known as Por Qualche Dollaro in Più, or something. It should be clarified that though this is a trilogy, the movies aren't codependent. The stories and characters don't carry from one movie to the next. Gian Maria Volonté isn't playing the same character here that he played in A Fistful of Dollars, and Lee Van Cleef isn't playing the same character here that he plays in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Let's cut to the chase. I really liked this one as well, and I'm struggling to decide which of the two I liked more. And let's not even throw The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly into the mix. Let's just say it's an awesome trilogy. Clint Eastwood is still incredibly cool, and it takes a superlatively cool guy to look sexy wearing that poncho, but this time he's evenly matched up with Lee Van Cleef. They're both bounty hunters, bounty killers actually, on the hunt for a maniacal murderer called El Indio and his gang. Since neither one will back down and let the other take the quarry, they team up in pursuit of the gang and the hefty reward that comes with its capture. It was really good to see Eastwood and Van Cleef playing off each other as dual protagonists, and by really good, I mean I actually got a warm, fuzzy feeling from it. I'm not a Western expert, but I know it's a very rare thing to see Lee Van Cleef playing a good guy. This movie is long, 2 hours and 12 minutes, so longer than the first one, but not as long as the third one, but it didn't feel like it. There's some fantastic dialogue, and some very funny parts. I especially loved the scene where Eastwood visits the guy who lives near the train and is going out of his mind from the noise. That was hilarious. It was also a surprise to see Klaus Kinski in a supporting role as a deranged, trigger-happy member of Indio's gang, and once again I was surprised. I was stunned by the dramatic, emotional level the story reached. The music helped a lot with that. The melancholy chime of a pocket watch plays a significant role as a plot device and as a musical theme, and the true meaning of it all is revealed in the final sequence, which I loved so much that I have gone back and rewatched it a few times. I think I've mentioned in the past that I'm a fan of movie moments where you see a character come to a sudden realization or understanding. In an instant, their whole perspective changes, and that's reflected in their face. The final duel in For a Few Dollars More has one of these moments. The last 15 minutes or so is, masterful in how everything comes together. The acting, the dialogue, the tight close-ups, the music. It's so powerful. I'm still thinking about it a full week later. Okay, next one. Movie number, I'm not keeping track. 1959's The Atomic Submarine. This is a so-so horror movie in which something is destroying subs and ships in the Arctic or causing them to disappear. Guess what? It's an alien underwater spacecraft. This was another sci-fi movie my mom and I watched, but it didn't fare as well as the last one. I didn't like the main character much. He was goofy, but also kind of a jerk, and the low-budget effects were slow and silly with a wonky alien reveal. The saving graces were the side commentary between me and my mom, which the movie's goofiness enabled, and Tom Conway's supporting role as a scientific gentleman. He lent the movie some dignity and class, plus he seemed a little amused when delivering his lines, and because he was amused, I was amused. The second to last movie is 1965's Rapture, a coming-of-age story set in France in which Patricia Gozzi stars as Agnes, a girl living with her father, played by Melvyn Douglas, and a young woman who stays and keeps house for them. From the outset, you're not sure if Agnes is just awkward and lonely, stuck in that awful, difficult transition period of adolescence, which is the worst, or if there's something more seriously wrong with her. Life changes for the three of them when an escaped convict shows up on their property and Agnes takes him in, believing that he's the scarecrow she made come to life. Patricia Gozzi's performance is remarkably vulnerable. She's like a willful child, and yet she's incredibly fragile. Dean Stockwell plays the convict. Hey, he was the kid that was Richard Widmark's co-star in Down to the Sea and Ships. And Stockwell's character's handling of this strange situation with a young, sensitive girl who adores him and believes she made him and she owns him is quite stirring. There's a lot of sensitivity in both of their performances. The thing that made me feel a little uneasy was the ambiguity of the characters' ages. I was firmly convinced that Agnes was about 14, maybe 15, and I'd put Stockwell's Yosef around 23 or 25. But at a certain point I was like, whoa, she must be older than I think she is, right? So there was that, but it's a moving drama with a noteworthy lead performance from a young actress I'm not at all familiar with. And in some ways it reminded me of 1968's The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, except this one never made me want to scream in agonized frustration like that movie did. And last one, I finally got to see 1950's Champagne for Caesar. This was long overdue. I have had opportunities to watch it before and never took advantage of them. I have no excuses. It's a light romantic comedy in which my hero, Ronald Colman, plays a learned genius who matches wits against the Milady Soap Company in general, and its owner Vincent Price in particular, on a game show, winning every round to the point that he may actually buy them out. To prevent that, they send in Celeste Holm to distract and disarm him with her feminine wiles. As someone who is sure to turn into a pile of mush whenever Ronald Colman is around, and who is also a fan of Vincent Price, the big draw for me was seeing and hearing Vincent Price and Ronald Colman share the screen. Colman is dreamy, even at this later point in his career, and it's so much fun seeing him opposite Price, now that I know how Price idolized him as a young actor, and getting to make this movie with his hero was a big deal for him, and then they became friends, and attended each other's dinner parties. Hollywood is crazy. Together they deliver delightfully funny performances. It's a rare chance for both of them to stretch their comic muscles. Colman shows he can do physical comedy and verbal comedy, and Price is a ham's ham here, throwing his all into the hilariously quirky part of a mustache-twirling corporate villain. Price is so over the top, you can tell he had a ton of fun with this. He is outrageous. I grant that the storyline has its absurdities. This is not a meaty drama, it's just bubbly entertainment. Celeste Holm comes in halfway through as Colman's love interest, and honestly, her character is a phony so much of the time that it's hard to tell when she's being sincere. I'm not sure I knew anything about her at the end, and I couldn't tell if it was a happy ending or not. But I wasn't exactly looking for substance here. This movie also features Barbara Britton, Art Linkletter, and the voice of Mel Blanc as Caesar the Parrot, and I am very glad that I finally saw it after all this time. That's it, I guess. Lots of movies on the list this time. Not as many as there could have been, though, if we hadn't spent time finishing The Fugitive. You know what that means, right? I hope you enjoyed this month's collection. A list of the movies I mentioned can be found in the description. I'd love to hear your thoughts on them, so go ahead and share what you think in the comments below, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.